I never thought I'd set foot in that house again. Not after the night Mama slammed the door behind me and told me to find my own life somewhere else. That was 27 years ago. Yet here I was, standing on the cracked front walkway of the old Coleman home on Linden Street, clutching the brass key the lawyer handed me like it was a weapon. The air smelled the same, sweet magnolia and dust. The same creaking porch boards moaned under my shoes, the same chipped blue paint on the railing Mama never got around to fixing. For a second, I almost expected to see her through the front window, wearing her Sunday robe, humming Al Green while starring her morning coffee. But Mama was gone now, and this house, this heavy, memory-soaked thing, was mine. When I opened the door, a wave of stale air and old perfume hit me. The place felt like it had been holding its breath since the funeral. Lace curtains still hung by the window, yellowed now, and the same worn sofa sat under the family photo wall. Dust glimmered in shafts of light slicing through the blinds. I stood in the doorway for a long while, listening. The quiet felt alive. Mama's things were everywhere. Her Bible on the coffee table, her reading glasses folded neatly beside it, her slippers by the chair. It was like she'd just stepped out for a moment. I felt my throat tighten. Grief has a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. I wandered room to room, tracing my fingers over furniture that held decades of stories. Every mark, every scuff had a history, and with each memory, guilt swelled for the arguments, the distance, the years I never called enough. In the back of the hallway, I found something strange. The door to the storage room, the one Mama always kept locked, was wide open. Inside, boxes were stacked to the ceiling, labeled in her careful handwriting. Bills, keepsakes, letters. One box sat apart from the rest, lid slightly ajar. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe curiosity, maybe something deeper. That ache you feel when you know there's still a piece of the story missing. Inside, I found a stack of old letters bound by a faded ribbon. The top one was addressed in Mama's handwriting, but not to me. It was addressed to a woman named Darlene West. The postmark was from 1976, the year before I was born. My heart thudded in my chest as I unfolded the fragile paper. Dear Darlene, I pray you'll understand why I had to do what I did. I stopped reading. My fingers trembled. Something about that tone, that quiet pleading, told me I wasn't ready for what came next. I put the letter back and closed the box, but the words wouldn't stop echoing. I had to do what I did. I didn't sleep much that night. The house creaked and sighed like it was remembering me too. I lay in Mama's old bed, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the night trains passing through Atlanta. In the dark, I can almost hear her voice again, strong, weary, and full of love she didn't always know how to show. Marcia, baby, sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie ever did. Back then, I never understood what she meant, but now I was starting to think I would. I woke up before dawn, my mind still tangled in the sound of Mama's voice, that soft drawl that used to fill every corner of this house. Now just a ghost in the walls. The air was thick and still. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and for a second, I thought I heard the faint hum of her favorite gospel song, His Eyes on the Sparrow. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe Mama wasn't done talking yet. The box of letters sat on the nightstand where I'd left it, like it had been waiting for me. I stared at it for a long time, feeling that same nervous buzz in my chest. That name, Darlene West, kept circling in my mind like a loose thread I couldn't stop pulling. Who was she? I slid the ribbon off the stack, slow and careful, like unwrapping something sacred. The paper was brittle, yellow around the edges, but Mama's handwriting was steady, that same looping cursive she used in birthday cards. The second letter began the same way. Dear Darlene, I thought I could keep my promise, but every time I look at her, I see you. She has your eyes. I don't know how much longer I can live with this secret. I froze. She has your eyes. I had always been told I looked like Mama. Same cheekbones, same skin tone, same stubborn mouth. But suddenly, that didn't feel as certain anymore. I kept reading, each line scraping something raw inside me. I pray one day you'll forgive me. Maybe God already has, but I haven't forgiven myself. Please don't come here. It's better if she never knows. The she was me. I knew it deep in my bones. The paper slipped from my hands. My breath came shallow. I stumbled to the mirror across the room and looked at myself. 54 years old, brown skin like polished chestnut, silver streaks in my curls, the same tired eyes I'd seen in Mama all my life. But now, those eyes looked unfamiliar. Was I staring at someone else's reflection? I grabbed my phone and called the only person I could think of. Aunt Louise, Mama's older sister. She picked up on the second ring, her voice groggy but sharp as ever. "Marcia, you okay, baby?" "No," I said softly. "I found some letters in Mama's house from a woman named Darlene West. You know her?" The silence that followed stretched so long I thought the line had dropped. "Louise," finally she sighed. "Lord, Evelyn should have burned those letters years ago." I gripped the phone tighter. "Louise, was Mama talking about me?" Her breath hitched. "Marcia, you don't want that answer." "I do," I said louder now. "I need it." Another long pause. Then in a low, trembling voice, she said, "Darlene West was your mama's best friend once, and she was your real mother." The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air like static, sharp and disbelieving. When I finally managed to speak, it came out as a whisper. "What are you saying? Evelyn couldn't have children, baby. She wanted one so bad. When Darlene got pregnant and couldn't raise the baby, Evelyn, she took you, raised you like her own." I felt my knees weaken. The floor seemed to tilt under me. "She lied to me my whole life?" I said. "She loved you your whole life," Aunt Louise said quietly. "That's the difference." But I didn't hear her after that. My mind was spinning, my chest tight. I looked around the room at the photos on the wall, the embroidered Family Forever pillow, Mama's Bible on the dresser, and for the first time, it all felt like someone else's life I'd been living inside. I sat on the bed for hours, the letters spread out before me. My hands shook as I read them again and again, the words blurring through tears. Every "I'm sorry," every "forgive me," every "she'll never know." Well, now I knew, and there was no going back. That evening, the house felt smaller, tighter, like it was holding its breath along with me. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and sat by the window, watching the last of the sunlight fade through the magnolia branches. Mama always said, "The truth don't set you free, baby. It just makes you honest." And sitting there in her house, knowing who I really was, I finally understood what that meant. Freedom and pain were just two sides of the same coin, and I just flipped mine.
The next morning I couldn't eat. Couldn't even sip my coffee. The name Darlene West echoed in my head like a drum beat. I'd spent half the night searching through the rest of Mama's letters, each one tangled in guilt and apology. Some were unsigned, but her words were always the same, begging forgiveness from a woman who'd been erased from my life before I could even speak her name. When the sun rose over Linden Street, the house looked softer, almost kind again. But I wasn't fooled. I'd learned that even the prettiest homes could hide the deepest lies. I pulled Mama's old address book from the kitchen drawer, the one with the cracked leather cover and worn gold lettering. Her neat handwriting filled the pages. Cousins, church friends, old co-workers from the school district. I flipped through slowly until I found it. Near the bottom of a yellowing page, Darlene West, Decatur, GA. There was an address, but no phone number. For a long moment, I just stared at the name. Part of me wanted to slam the book shut, pretend I'd never seen it. But something deeper, something fierce kept whispering, "You've been silent long enough." So I packed a bag. 2 hours later, I was driving down I-75 toward Atlanta, Mama's letters in the passenger seat beside me. The sky was wide and blue, cotton clouds floating like pieces of forgiveness waiting to fall. Every mile closer made my heart thump harder. I turned the radio off, couldn't bear the noise. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they ached. When I reached Decatur, I found myself on a quiet street lined with oak trees and brick houses, all trimmed with flower beds. Number 318 was a small beige cottage with wind chimes on the porch. They tinkled softly in the breeze like a welcome or a warning. I sat in the car for 10 minutes, my pulse in my ears. What was I even going to say? "Hi, I think you're my mother." That sounded ridiculous, like something out of a soap opera. But the ache inside me didn't care how ridiculous it sounded. It wanted the truth. Finally, I got out, walked up the narrow path, and knocked. It took a moment, but the door opened. The woman standing there was older than I expected, maybe in her 70s, tall with deep brown skin, a regal posture, and silver locks pinned neatly behind her head. Her eyes were the same shade of amber as mine. For a second, neither of us spoke. "Yes?" she said, voice strong but cautious. I swallowed hard. "Are you Darlene West?" Her expression froze. "Who's asking?" "My name is Marcia Coleman. My throat tightened. "I think you knew my mother, Evelyn Hayes." The color drained from her face. She reached for the doorframe to steady herself. "Evelyn," she whispered almost to herself. "Lord have mercy." I took a breath. "I need answers." Her voice cracked. "And what good will that do you, child? The past don't change just because you drag it back into the light. I deserve to know where I come from." Darlene's gaze softened, though her lips trembled. "You look just like him, you know." "Like who?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Your father." The name she spoke next hit me like a blow. I knew that name. Mama used to talk about a Samuel from church, a man who moved away when I was little. I never thought twice about it. Darlene's hand shook as she motioned for me to come inside. The living room smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. Family photos lined every surface, smiling faces I didn't recognize except one. A man with warm brown skin and a kind smile, his arm around Darlene. "That's him," she said, noticing my stare. "He passed 5 years ago." I nodded numbly. "So, he never knew about me?" She looked away. "He knew. He just thought you were better off where you were." The room went silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. "I never wanted to give you up," Darlene said finally. "I was young, single, scared. Evelyn wanted a child so bad and she promised you would have a better life. I believed her. Maybe I wanted to believe her." Tears slid down her cheeks as she talked his way through all those years of silence. I stared at her, at this stranger with my eyes and my father's smile, and I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Relief? Maybe all of it. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely a whisper. "I had a good life, but I would have wanted to know you." Darlene nodded, crying quietly. "I wanted that too, baby. I truly did." We sat there for a long time, holding hands across that small table, two women bound by decades of silence, finding each other too late, and yet somehow just in time. That night, as I drove back to Linden Street, the sky was heavy with stars. I rolled the window down and let the wind whip my curls. My life had split open, but in a strange way, I felt lighter, like something long buried had finally started to breathe. Mama lied. Yes, but maybe love had lived somewhere inside that lie too, and maybe now it was finally my turn to decide what to do with it.
The drive back to Savannah felt longer this time. Not because of the miles, but because of the weight I carried home. Every word Darlene had said was still echoing in my ears. I kept hearing her voice when she whispered, "You look just like him." It made me want to cry and scream at the same time. By the time I pulled up to the house on Linden Street, the sun had already dipped below the magnolia tree. The branches swayed gently in the wind, shadows reaching across the porch like open arms. I sat in the car for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I was supposed to feel. Mama, Evelyn, wasn't my blood, but she had raised me, loved me, sacrificed everything to give me a life full of grace and safety. Darlene might have brought me into the world, but Evelyn was the one who built mine. Still, the betrayal stung. Every bedtime story, every birthday cake, every "baby, I love you more than life itself," they all felt a little different now, like pieces of a puzzle that no longer fit the same. I walked into the house, the air thick with memories and something new, truth. I went straight to Mama's bedroom, the one that still smelled faintly of her lavender lotion. I sat on her bed and stared at the old framed photo of us on the dresser, me in my high school cap and gown, her smiling proudly beside me. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I whispered. "I would have loved you anyway." For a moment it felt like the house was listening. The walls creaked softly, the magnolia branches brushed against the window, and the air settled into that kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full of answers you're not ready to hear. I reached under her bed and pulled out the last box I hadn't opened yet. Inside were folded quilts, a stack of church bulletins, and one sealed envelope. My name was written on it in her steady hand. I froze. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It began, "My dearest Marcia, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't find the courage to tell you myself. I hope you'll understand someday that everything I did out of love." I pressed my hand against my mouth, tears slipping free. She wrote about Darlene, how they'd been like sisters once, both young and struggling. Darlene had fallen for the wrong man, a married one. When she got pregnant, the church turned their backs on her. Evelyn had stepped in, first to help, then to protect. "I begged her to let me raise you," the letter said. "I thought I could give you the life she couldn't. But as the years went by, the guilt ate at me. Every time you called me Mama, I thanked God, and I asked him to forgive me for taking something that wasn't mine." I clutched the letter against my chest. All those years I thought Mama was strong because she never broke down, never faltered, but now I saw that her strength came from carrying a pain I never knew existed. I spent the rest of that night sitting on her bed, reading the letter over and over until the words blurred into one long heartbeat of love and sorrow. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock on the door. "Miss Coleman." It was Mr. Ellis, our neighbor, a tall, gentle man in his 60s who lived across the street forever. He stood there holding a brown envelope. "Found this in my mailbox by mistake," he said, handing it to me. It was postmarked 3 weeks ago from Atlanta, Georgia. The sender? Darlene West. I felt my stomach twist as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Me as a baby, wrapped in a pink blanket, Darlene smiling down on me. On the back she'd written, "I never stopped loving you. Maybe now you'll understand." My knees went weak. I sank down on the porch steps, staring at the photo through tears. 2 women, one who birthed me, one who raised me, both carrying the same love, just wearing it differently. Maybe love wasn't about who told the truth first. Maybe it was about who stayed when the truth came crashing down. As I looked at that picture, I realized something Mama had been trying to teach me all along. Love doesn't always arrive wrapped in honesty. Sometimes it comes with secrets, silence, and sacrifices you don't see until it's too late. And still, it's love. That night, I placed Mama's letter and Darlene's photo side by side on my nightstand. The two halves of my story finally lying together. Not perfect, but real. I lay back on the bed and whispered into the darkness, "I forgive you, Mama, and I forgive you too, Darlene." Somewhere outside, the wind picked up through the magnolia branches, soft and low, like 2 voices humming the same lullaby. Morning came softly. The kind of quiet southern morning where the dew clings to everything like memory. I woke up with the letter still clutched in my hand. The paper wrinkled and warm from my grip. My eyes burned, my heart ached, but there was also something new inside me, a small, steady calm, like the air after a storm. I sat up slowly, running my fingers over Mama's handwriting one last time. She had always been careful, deliberate, even with her words. Her penmanship was perfect. Just like her cooking, her singing, her way of folding the laundry with love stitched into every corner. And now that I knew what she carried all these years, I didn't see perfection anymore. I saw pain wrapped in grace. After making a cup of coffee, I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked at my own face like it was new. My skin, a warm cocoa brown, looked just like Evelyn's, but my eyes were Darlene's, sharp, questioning, always searching for more. For the first time, I saw both women staring back at me, the mother who raised me and the mother who gave me life. The realization was strange, but grounding. I wasn't just a product of one woman's strength. I was the bridge between two. That morning, I decided I couldn't keep running from the truth or hiding from the pain. If there was one thing both Evelyn and Darlene had taught me, it was this: a woman has to face what hurts if she ever wants to heal. So I grabbed my keys, put on Mama's old denim jacket, and drove toward the nursing home where Darlene worked. The road out of Savannah was lined with moss-draped oaks, their limbs like old arms stretched toward heaven. Gospel music hummed low on the radio. Mahalia Jackson's voice deep and aching, filling the car like prayer. When I arrived, the air smelled faintly of bleach and gardenias. I signed in at the front desk, my hands trembling. "She's in room 207. The nurse said with a kind smile. The hallway seemed endless. My footsteps echoed softly on the tile floor as I walked toward the room where Darlene sat by a window folding towels. She looked up as soon as I entered. Her eyes widened and the towel slipped from her hand. "Marcia?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. I swallowed hard. I read Mama's letter. Her lips trembled at the sound of the word Mama. "She told you?" I shook my head. "Not while she was alive." She stood up slowly. She was smaller than I remembered, but her presence still filled the room. Her hair, which was once thick and black, was streaked with silver now, and her uniform looked a size too big. But her eyes, those deep, searching eyes, held the same warmth that haunted me since the day we met. "I wanted to tell you," she said, her voice soft, "but Evelyn, she begged me not to. She said she'd lose you if I did. She didn't lose me, not really, but now I feel like I lost both of you." She took a hesitant step forward. "You didn't lose us, baby. You are us." Tears filled my eyes again. "Why didn't you fight for me?" Her hands shook as she reached for mine. "Because I didn't want you growing up in shame. Back then, in our town, a single black woman with a baby from a married man, they would have eaten me alive. Evelyn gave you her name, her home, her church family. She gave you the world I couldn't." The anger I had carried melted a little. "You think giving me up was love?" She nodded, her eyes wet, the hardest kind. I sank into the chair across from her. The clock ticked softly on the wall. For a long moment, the silence between us said more words than ever could. After a while, she walked over to a small dresser and pulled out an old photo, the same one she'd mailed me. She smiled faintly. "You were so small. Evelyn cried the whole day she took you home. I told her you'd better raise her to be strong, and she did." I let out a shaky breath. "She did." We talked for hours. About Evelyn, about the past, about the men who left and the women who stayed, about the way pain passes from mother to daughter if you don't stop it. By the time I left, the sun was setting, the sky over Savannah painted gold and crimson, and the magnolias swaying in the wind like slow applause. I felt lighter, not healed. Not yet, but something inside me had shifted. That night, I drove home, parked in front of Mama's house, and stood under the magnolia tree. Its flowers glowed pale in the moonlight, scent sweet and strong. I whispered to the stars above, "Thank you, Mama. Thank you, Darlene. I understand now." The wind moved gently through the branches, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally stopped running from what made me who I am.
The next morning, I sat at Mama's old writing desk, the same one where she used to pay bills, write grocery lists, and sometimes pen little notes she'd tuck into my lunch when I was a girl. The surface was worn smooth by years of love and living. Her favorite pen, a gold one with her initials, lay across a folded sheet of stationery. I smoothed the paper and took a deep breath. I hadn't written a letter in years, not since high school, but somehow it felt right, like the only way I could speak without my voice shaking. I began to write, "Dear Mama, I met her today, Darlene, my birth mother. She told me everything. I wanted to be angry, but the truth is I couldn't be. I saw you in her eyes, Mama. The same hurt, the same fire. I think you two loved me in different ways, but both of you gave me life. You always said I had your strength. Now I think I have hers too." As I wrote, tears fell softly onto the page, blurring some of the ink. I didn't wipe them away. They belonged there. Part of the truth. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the top drawer beside Mama's old Bible. Then I opened the window to let the morning light spill across the room. Outside, the magnolia tree shimmered with dew, its branches alive with the songs of early birds. I stood there for a long time, watching the world wake up, and I felt Mama's presence in every ray of sunlight. That afternoon, Tasha stopped by. "Hey, Ma." She slipped off her sneakers at the door. "You okay?" I turned and smiled, better than I've been in a long time. She raised her eyebrow. You look different. Maybe I finally see myself clear. We sat together at the kitchen table where Evelyn and I had shared countless meals and laughter. I poured us both iced tea and told her everything. The letter, Darlene, the visit. Tasha listened quietly, her eyes wide and wet. When she finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. So, you have two moms? I laughed softly. Guess so. Does that make me extra loved? Her words hit me right in the chest. I nodded. Exactly that. She leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. You know, I used to think you were invincible, Ma. Like nothing ever got to you. But now, I think the strongest thing you've ever done is let yourself feel that child of mine. So young, but already wise. I smiled through the tears. You're right, baby. Maybe strength ain't about not breaking. Maybe it's about knowing how to rebuild. The next day, I drove back to the nursing home. Darlene was waiting for me outside, sitting on a bench in her plain blue uniform. When she saw me, she stood up slowly, a shy smile tugging at her lips. I wasn't sure you'd come back, she said. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. But I guess I've got more questions than one visit can answer. We walked to a little cafe down the street. The place smelled like coffee and buttered toast. And for a moment, it felt almost ordinary, like two women catching up after years apart. I kept track of you, Darlene confessed. I used to drive by your school sometimes. I saw you graduate, you know. Evelyn told me not to come close, but I had to see you walk that stage. I felt a lump rise in my throat. You were there? She nodded, far in the back, crying so hard I could barely see. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. You could have said something. She smiled sadly. And ruin your day? No, baby, that was your moment. I just needed to know you were okay. There was a silence between us, full of all the years that had been lost, all the birthdays, holidays, hugs that never happened. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand. You got her strength, Marcia, but you've also got my heart. Don't let what we couldn't fix break you. I nodded, tears blurring the world again. I won't. When I left that day, I realized something I hadn't before. Forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It unfolds layer by layer like the petals of a magnolia bloom, and I was still in the middle of that blooming. That night, I sat on the porch again, sipping tea under the stars. I thought about the two women who had shaped me, one who raised me, one who gave me life, and I thought about the woman I was becoming because of them both. I whispered into the warm Georgia air, I'm still learning how to love you both. The magnolia leaves rustled softly as if answering back, and I knew that somewhere, in heaven or here on earth, they both heard me.
The following week, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was breathing with me, exhaling memories, inhaling forgiveness. Every creak in the wood sounded like a whisper. Every gust through the magnolia branches carried a voice I almost recognized. On Sunday morning, I walked through each room with a bucket of soapy water, cleaning not just dirt, but something deeper, the kind of heaviness that lingers in silence. I scrubbed walls, opened windows, and played some old Sam Cooke on the radio. A change is gonna come filled the house, and I felt every word in my bones. By afternoon, sunlight streamed through clean panes, painting the floors gold. For the first time, the place felt like it was waking up again. When I reached Mama's old bedroom, I hesitated. That room had been sealed like a tomb since the funeral. I couldn't bear to step inside, but today felt different. Today, I was ready. I turned the brass knob and opened the door. The air inside was still, thick with the scent of lavender and thyme. Her bed was neatly made, her Bible on the nightstand, her robe draped over the chair as if she'd only stepped out for a moment. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt tears rise before I even understood why. Maybe it was the quiet, or maybe it was the feeling that Mama's spirit still lingered there, watching me, proud and patient. Then I noticed something in the mirror across from the bed, a reflection that didn't seem quite right. A small box was tucked behind the mirror frame. My pulse quickened as I pulled it out. Inside were old letters tied together with a faded pink ribbon. The top one was addressed to my darling Marcia. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Baby girl, if you're reading this, I guess I'm gone. There are things I never had the courage to say out loud, and I reckon it's time you know them. I didn't hate your birth mother. I envied her. She gave you life, but I got to raise you, and for that I was both grateful
and guilty. I loved you too much to ever let you see the cracks in me. Maybe I should have. Maybe then you'd know that being strong don't mean never breaking. You were my heart, Marcia. I hope you find peace in every piece of your story, even the ones that hurt. Love always. Mama. I read it 3 times, each word carving itself into my heart. Mama had known about my search for truth long before I started it. She had seen the storm coming and left me an umbrella. That night, I stood in front of that same mirror and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who'd first stepped through that front door weeks ago. Her eyes carried history, but her shoulders no longer sagged under its weight. I whispered, "You did your best, Mama, and I forgive you." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Later that evening, I called Darlene. She answered after 1 ring. "Hey, baby," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I found something Mama left me, a letter." "She didn't hate you, Darlene. She loved me so much she tried to protect me from everything, even the truth." There was a pause, then a sound. A quiet, shaky laugh. Evelyn was a good woman, better than me in a lot of ways. She did what I couldn't. She did what she thought was right. But maybe it's time we stop letting old choices decide who we get to be. Silence hung between us. Not heavy, just full of new possibility. "I'd like to see you again. Maybe bring Tasha this time." Her voice trembled. "You do that?" "Yes," I said firmly. "You're part of this story too. She deserves to know you." That night I sat on the porch swing with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Fireflies dotted the yard, flickering like tiny lanterns guiding me forward. I could almost hear Mama humming through the breeze. And for the first time, I didn't ache. I just listened. Behind me, through the open window, I caught a glimpse of my reflection again. A woman framed by moonlight, a daughter of 2 mothers, and her own woman at last. The mirror and the door, both open now, and I knew in my spirit this was only the beginning.
A few days later, I found myself sitting in front of the courthouse in downtown Savannah, holding a small envelope that had arrived in the mail that morning. It was from Darlene. My hands trembled as I ran my finger along the edge, the rough paper whispering promises I wasn't sure I was ready to open. The square outside was alive, children chasing pigeons, a street musician playing an old blues tune, the scent of roasted pecans drifting through the air. Life moved around me, steady and unbothered, but my heart pounded like a drum against my ribs. I had lived 52 years under one story, and this envelope might change all of it. Inside was a single folded paper and a small photograph. The photo showed a young woman, Darlene, maybe 19, her face full of light and fear. She was holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Me. The letter was short. "My sweet Marcia, the day you were born, I was too young and too lost. Evelyn saved both of us. I gave her my baby, and she gave you a name that carried strength, Marcia Hayes. I've carried your name like a prayer ever since. If you'll have me, I'd like to carry it with you now. Love, Darlene." Tears blurred my vision. The words, "carried your name like a prayer," echoed through me. For years, I thought my story began with loss, but maybe it began with love. Messy, painful, complicated love. That afternoon, I drove to Mama's old church, the small white one on Magnolia Avenue, where the choirs still sang with the same unpolished beauty I remembered. The church doors creaked open, and the smell of wood polish and old hymnals wrapped around me like an embrace. Reverend Cole stood at the pulpit, a kind old man with kind eyes. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Marcia Hayes, back in the Lord's house." I smiled faintly, trying to find a little peace, Reverend. He nodded, motioning me forward. "You look just like your mama." Both of them, in their own way. His words caught me off guard. "You knew?" He sighed. "Child, this town knows more than it says, but some secrets ain't meant to hurt. They're meant to protect. Evelyn never wanted to keep the truth from you forever. She was just waiting for the right time." I looked around at the pews, the sunlight cutting through stained glass in colors of ruby and gold. I think she was trying to protect my heart. I said softly. He smiled. And maybe now you're strong enough to hold the whole truth. I sat in the front pew after he left, the echo of my name filling the quiet air. Marcia Hayes. The name both women had fought to give me. Both had suffered to protect. It wasn't a burden anymore. It was a bridge. That evening, I drove to Darlene's little home on the outskirts of town, a weathered blue bungalow with a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. I sat in the car for a long moment, watching her silhouette move behind the curtains. My hands gripped the steering wheel. My breath caught. Finally, I stepped out. When she opened the door, she froze. The same brown eyes, the same slope of nose, the same dimple in the left cheek when she tried to hide her smile. For a moment, I felt like I was looking in a mirror, aged by choices I'd never made. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," she whispered back. We stood there in silence until she stepped aside. "You look just like I did back then," she murmured, voice trembling. Inside, the house was simple. Crocheted blankets, family pictures, the faint smell of cornbread in the air. On the mantel, a single framed photo caught my eye. A young woman in a graduation gown. "My daughter," Darlene said quietly. "Your sister, Angela." My throat tightened. "I have a sister? She's 23, works at the hospital." She paused, eyes glistening. "She's known about you, Marcia. She's always wanted to meet you." I didn't speak for a long moment. My whole life, I thought I was alone in the world, and now I wasn't. Darlene reached out, hesitant, fingers shaking. "Can I?" I nodded. Her hands closed around mine. Warm, familiar. "You got your daddy's steadiness and your mama's heart. Both your mamas." That was it. The dam broke. I leaned into her arms, sobbing. Decades of confusion, anger, love, all spilling into her faded sweater. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was so scared. I didn't think I'd ever earn the right to hear you call me Mama." I pulled back, tears streaking my face. "Maybe we can start with Darlene. We'll work our way from there." She smiled through her tears. "That's fair." When I drove home later that night, the magnolia tree outside my window was in bloom again. The petals gleamed under the moonlight, soft and alive. I sat on my porch, the cool night air brushing my face, and whispered, "Thank you, Mama, both of you." For the first time, my story didn't feel broken. It felt whole.
A week later, my kitchen table, that old oak one with the faint water rings and the groove down the middle, saw something it never had before. 2 mothers, 1 daughter, 3 generations of stories sitting across from each other, with the magnolia tree glowing through the window like a silent witness. Evelyn's absence still filled the air, but her spirit hovered in every detail. The floral curtains she sewed by hand, the scent of nutmeg that lingered no matter how many times I scrubbed the counters. It felt like she was sitting at the head of the table, nodding in approval. Darlene sat to my left, dressed in a soft cream blouse, her once dark hair streaked with gray. She fidgeted with her napkin like a schoolgirl caught doing something brave. Across from us sat Tasha, my daughter, head full of braids, denim jacket, skeptical eyes that had seen too much for her 17 years. The silence was thick enough to touch. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Tasha, this is Darlene," I said carefully. Darlene finished for me, her voice shaking. "I'm your grandmother, baby." Tasha blinked, lips parting in disbelief. "My what?" "Your grandmother," I repeated, my hand brushing Tasha's. "It's a long story." Darlene smiled gently. "You've got my nose and those eyes. Lord, those are your mama's." Tasha folded her arms. "How come I'm just hearing about you now?" "Because I didn't even know until a few weeks ago. Life hid some things from me, and I guess I passed that hiding down without meaning to." Tasha's stare softened, though her brows still knit together. "You always say secrets rot the soul." I nodded. "And I was wrong for holding back. You're old enough to know where you come from, and to see that sometimes forgiveness looks like starting over." Darlene reached for Tasha's hand, tentative as a prayer. "I don't want to take anything from y'all. I just want to know you, baby, if you'll let me." Tasha hesitated, eyes darting between us, then slowly placed her small hand over Darlene's. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. And just like that, something shifted in the room. The tension, the ache, the unspoken guilt, it all melted a little. The moment wasn't perfect, but it was real. After dinner, I walked out onto the porch. The night air was thick and sweet, the magnolia trees swaying like an old friend keeping time with the wind. Darlene joined me, mug of tea in hand. "She's a good girl," she said, watching Tasha through the window. "She's stronger than I ever was," I admitted, "but maybe she needed to be." Darlene nodded slowly. "You did a fine job, Marcia. Evelyn would be proud." I swallowed hard. "You talk about her like she's still here." "Oh, she's here," she said with a soft cuckle. "That woman's too stubborn to leave. You can feel her in the air, can't you?" I smiled. "Every day." Darlene leaned against the porch rail, her face glowing in the amber light. "You know, I used to hate her. For taking you, for raising you better than I could. But now, I just thank her. She gave you what I couldn't back then." Her words cracked something in me, the last bit of anger I'd been carrying. "You both gave me what I needed," I said quietly. "She gave me roots, and you gave me reason." Darlene turned toward me, eyes shining. "You sound just like her." Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. The moonlight spilled across the table, silvering the edges of the old wood. I laid 2 photographs side by side, one of Evelyn holding me as a baby, the other of Darlene, at the same age, wild curls and hopeful eyes. For the first time, I didn't see division. I saw a line. Imperfect but unbroken, running straight through generations of Black women who carried their families through storms. And I realized something that changed everything. Strength isn't about who you raised or who you birthed you. It's about who you become after you learn the truth. The next morning, I woke to bird song and the smell of coffee. Tasha was already up, laughing with Darlene at the kitchen table. That sound, 2 generations finding each other, was better than any gospel I'd ever heard. I leaned in the doorway, smiling. "Y'all sound like trouble already." Tasha grinned. "Grandma's teaching me how to make her sweet tea recipe." "Grandma, huh?" I teased. Darlene's eyes filled with tears. She tried to hide behind her mug. "Guess I earned that one today." And as sunlight poured through the window, illuminating 3 women bound by blood and choice, I knew something sacred had begun to heal. That night, before bed, I stood by my window and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for the kind of love that survives the truth." The morning after Darlene's visit, I found myself back in the attic. The same place that once filled me with pain now felt strangely peaceful, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. Dust hung in the air like slow-moving memories, each box and photograph carrying the quiet echo of those who came before me. As I sorted through old trunks, I came across a weathered shoebox tied with a faded blue ribbon. It was tucked under Evelyn's quilt, as if she'd meant to leave it for me all along. I sat cross-legged on the wooden floor and untied the ribbon with trembling fingers. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, yellowed and brittle, written in Evelyn's graceful, looping handwriting. Some were addressed to Marcia, others to Darlene. The oldest one caught my eye first. "If you're reading this," it began, "then maybe you found your way to the truth I couldn't speak." I held my breath as I read. Evelyn wrote about how she found me, a crying newborn left on her porch one humid July night, wrapped in a hospital blanket. She said she knew whose baby I was the moment she saw me. "Your mother came to me crying that night," the letter said, "saying she couldn't raise you right. But I knew God didn't make families just one way. I took you in, not to steal you, but to save you until she could find her way back." My eyes burned. The attic spun around me. All these years I thought Darlene had abandoned me, but the truth was messier and kinder than I ever imagined. Evelyn didn't take me from Darlene. She took me for her. I pulled out another letter. This one addressed to Darlene, dated years later. Evelyn's tone was softer, almost weary. "She's growing fast," she wrote. "She's got your laugh. She asks questions I don't always know how to answer. Maybe one day you'll both forgive me for doing what I thought was right." Tears streamed freely now. All my life I'd carried the ache of betrayal, thinking Evelyn had lied, that Darlene had walked away. But what lay before me was a tapestry of love stitched through pain, choices made not from selfishness, but from survival. That realization broke something open in me and filled the empty places with grace. Later that afternoon, I brought the letters downstairs. Darlene and Tasha were sitting in the living room watching some old Tyler Perry rerun, laughing at the screen like like old friends. I stood there, holding the box like it was sacred. "Y'all," I said softly, "I think I found something we all need to read." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table that has seen arguments, tears, and forgiveness. I laid the letters out in order, and together we began to read them aloud. As Darlene's eyes moved across the pages, her hand covered her mouth. "Lord, she never told me she kept these," she whispered. "I thought she hated me till the day she died." Tasha reached for her grandmother's hand. "She didn't hate you," she said gently. "She loved you both." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the magnolia trees swayed, casting dappled light across the letters, like even the world was leaning in to listen. When we finished the last one, no one spoke for a while. Then Darlene smiled through tears. "She was always stubborn," she said, "but she had a good heart. I guess she was trying to hold us all together." I nodded. She did, in her own way. That night, I sat by the window with the letter spread out in front of me, rereading my favorite lines. Evelyn's voice, wise, imperfect, loving, filled my mind. "Love doesn't always look the way it should," she had written. "Sometimes it hides behind mistakes. Sometimes it hurts before it heals. But if it's real, it always finds its way back." I whispered those words into the night air, feeling them settle deep in my bones. For the first time in decades, I felt whole, not because I had all the answers, but because I finally understood the questions. The past hadn't stolen my peace. It had shaped it. When I turned off the lamp, the magnolia tree outside glowed faintly in the moonlight. Its petals fluttered like soft wings, and I thought of Evelyn, of her laugh, her strength, her stubborn grace. "I forgive you," I whispered into the quiet stillness. And in the silent stillness, it felt like she whispered back, "I know." The morning light crept through the curtains like a quiet blessing. I woke before anyone else, wrapped in my robe, the house humming softly with the kind of peace that only comes after a storm has passed. The letters still lay on the kitchen table, their edges curled slightly from the night's humidity. I didn't move them. Somehow it felt right that they stayed there, a small altar of truth and forgiveness. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the smell of roasted beans filling the room, and stared out the window. The magnolia tree stood tall and still, its blossoms heavy and full. For the first time, I saw it not as a reminder of Evelyn's secrets, but as a symbol of everything she tried to hold together. The love, the pain, the survival. I smiled softly. "You did your best," I murmured to the empty kitchen, "and I see that now." Just then I heard slow footsteps behind me. Darlene shuffled in wearing her old pink robe, her hair wrapped up tight. Her face looked softer than I'd seen it in years. "Morning, baby," she said, her voice hoarse but kind. "Morning, Mama," I replied, and the word Mama didn't feel strange this time. It felt earned. She looked down at the letters. "I was thinking about her all night," she said, "about how she must have carried all that guilt. I wish I could have told her I understood." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "Maybe she knows," I said. "Maybe this," I gestured to the letters, "was her way of telling us to stop running from the past." She smiled faintly, her eyes wet. "You got her way with words, you know that?" I laughed. "Guess some things just run in the blood." Later that afternoon, Tasha came over again, holding her phone up like she was on a mission. "Okay, Grandma, Aunt Marcia, I've been thinking." We both looked at her wearily. Whenever Tasha said, "I've been thinking," it meant she was about to shake something up. "What now, baby?" Darlene asked. "I want to make a short documentary," she said, her voice full of determination, "about Grandma Evelyn, about us. The truth, the forgiveness, all of it. People need to hear this. Families like ours, they break because folks keep secrets. Maybe this can help someone else heal too." I blinked, stunned by her boldness. "You mean putting our business out there for the world to see?" "Not all the mess, Auntie, just the message." Darlene chuckled. "Lord, this child gonna make me famous after all." But when I looked at her, I saw pride, real glowing pride. Not fear. And I felt it too. Maybe our story wasn't just ours anymore. Maybe it was a bridge for someone else who'd been cut off from their truth. "All right," I said finally, "let's do it." The next few weeks were filled with laughter,
tears, and more memories than I could count. Tasha filmed us in the kitchen, on the porch, under the magnolia tree. She asked questions that made me think harder than I had in years. "What does forgiveness feel like?" she asked one afternoon as the sunlight hit my face. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "It feels like breathing again after holding your breath too long, like letting the hurt go even if it still aches a little." She nodded, her camera steady. "And love, I said, smiling softly, is the thing that makes you do all that, even when it don't make sense." When she finished editing, we watched the film together on the old living room TV. The opening shot was of the magnolia tree, swaying gently in the wind. Then came Evelyn's voice. Tasha had found an old recording from years ago, her reading a church poem. "Love covers a multitude of sins. And grace is what keeps love alive." By the end of the short film, Darlene was crying quietly, her hands pressed together. I could only sit there, heart full, watching 3 generations of our family, bound by mistakes, mended by mercy, feel that little scream was something so much bigger than pain. When the credits rolled, Tasha looked at us and said softly, "I'm calling it Roots of Grace." Darlene nodded. "That's perfect, baby. Just perfect." That night, I stepped out on the porch alone. The air smelled of rain and fresh soil. I looked up at the stars, bright, scattered, eternal, and thought of Evelyn, of her hands guiding mine through life, even when I didn't know it. "I hope you're proud of us," I whispered. The wind rustled through the magnolia leaves, soft and low, almost like a sigh of approval. I smiled, wrapping my shawl tighter around my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by the past. I was held by it, safely, completely. Because in the end, forgiveness isn't just for the ones who hurt you, it's for the part of yourself that kept carrying the pain, and I was finally ready to set it down.
The day we buried the box under the magnolia tree, the air smelled like rain and old perfume, the kind my mother used to wear. The sun slipped between the clouds, painting the ground in silver and gold. Tasha had printed a copy of Roots of Grace and placed it inside, along with one of Evelyn's letters and a picture of the 3 of us, me, Mama Darlene, and Tasha, standing on the porch, laughing like we hadn't in years. It wasn't a funeral, it was a letting go. We stood there quietly for a long while, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I felt the weight of generations pressing gently against my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a blessing. "You ready, baby?" Darlene asked, her voice tremulous but sure. I nodded, the shovel handle cool in my hand. "Yeah, I think I finally am." We took turns covering the box with soil. The sound of dirt hitting wood was soft, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. When the last bit was done, Tasha knelt and planted a small sprig of white jasmine right above it. "It'll climb the magnolia one day, and maybe by then, somebody else will find it and remember that love can grow anywhere." I reached down and touched her shoulder. "You've got her spirit, you know that?" She grinned. "Guess it skips a generation." Darlene laughed through her tears. "Lord help us if she's got both our spirits. The world ain't ready for that." For a while, the 3 of us just stood there, 3 Black women bound by blood, memory, and a grace that didn't come easy. The breeze lifted a magnolia petal and carried it across the yard, landing right on my hand. I held it up to the light and smiled. Mama used to say magnolias were stubborn. They bloomed through storms, heat, and even neglect. Maybe that's why she loved them so much. Maybe that's why they kept coming back. That evening, the house was full of voices again. Family, neighbors, old friends who hadn't visited in years. The smell of baked chicken and cornbread filled the kitchen. Someone was laughing in the living room. Someone else was humming an old hymn in the hallway. I moved through the room slowly, taking it all in. The photos, the worn furniture, the echo of my childhood. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of Evelyn, not the perfect woman I'd built in my mind, but the real one, the one who'd stumbled and still found a way to keep walking. Darlene came up beside me with 2 glasses of sweet tea. "For us," she said, handing me one. I took it, clinking my glasses gently against hers. "To truth," I said. She smiled. "To love," Tasha popped her head in, "and to Roots of Grace. It's getting views already." We laughed, clinking our glasses again. For the first time, I realized the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt alive, full of history, yes, but also full of hope. The walls no longer whispered old pain. They carried new laughter instead. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung low and full, silvering the magnolia blossoms until they looked almost translucent. I sat down in the rocking chair and let it creak beneath me, the same one Mama used to rock me in. I could almost hear her voice in the wind. Baby, don't let the past keep you from living the rest of your story. I won't, I whispered. Not anymore. Tasha's film had gone viral by the end of the month. Messages poured in from women all over, some from Georgia, some from across the country, each one saying the same thing. Thank you for telling this story. It felt like mine too. I answered as many as I could. Each reply felt like laying another brick on a bridge that connected us all. Women who'd carried hurt in silence, now finding their voices again. One morning, weeks later, I stood at the edge of the yard, staring at the magnolia tree. The jasmine had already begun to climb, small tendrils reaching upward, curling toward the sky. I smiled through tears. Sometimes healing doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it grows slow, root by root, inch by inch, until one day you wake up and realize the ache isn't as sharp anymore. That's what forgiveness had become for me. Not forgetting, not excusing, just freeing. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of blossoms and dew, and whispered, "Thank you, Mama, for everything." The wind rustled softly through the branches, and I felt something. Not quite an answer, but a peace deep enough to be one. Then I turned toward the house, my house now, ready to fill it with new memories, new laughter, and a love brave enough to tell the truth. Because that's what legacy really is. Not what we leave behind, but what we learn to carry forward with open hands and an open heart.